Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome back. We're going to be starting part 3 in the book that we just started together, The Essenes, Children of the Light, and this is written by Stuart Wilson and Joanna Prentis. So part 2, sorry, did I say part 3? Part 2 is what we're starting. And this is titled The Founding of the Essene Brotherhood. Now, part 2 consists of 3 chapters, 2 that are shorter and a third one that is a bit longer. So I'm going to read the first 2 in part 2, which I believe are chapter 3 and 4, and then I will read 5 separately, and that will complete part 2. All right, so we've got something that comes from the Essene Master Banus, and this is reported by the historian Josephus. Your father is the cosmos, your mother is nature. Your brothers are your fellow men. Live in harmony with the laws and forces of the universe and nature and your own being. Okay, sorry. So it's chapter 4. We're going to read chapter 4 and 5, and then we'll leave 6 to read on its own. All right, so chapter 4 is titled The Kaloo. Thanks to the work of Dolores Cannon, I knew that much of the Essene knowledge came from a mysterious people called the Kaloo, and I was interested to see what Daniel might say about them. First of all, I asked him if the Kaloo were called by other names, and if you followed me in Power of the Magdalene, you know that they did mention the Kaloo a few times. So Daniel says, they were also called the Ancient Ones and the Wise Ones. They were from a very ancient race. It is said that we are also all descended from them, but I am not sure of this. The Kaloo came from far in the west. They stopped for some time in Egypt and then traveled on to our land and beyond. But their original land was far away. We call it the Old Land in the West. This was once a very large land, and there were islands in the main body of it. There were many peoples in this great land, and the Kaloo were only one of these races. I'm so sorry. I'm filming on a Saturday night, and my family is home. My daughter has a friend over. My son has 2 friends over, so I can't promise that you're not going to hear any background noise. Eventually, parts of the land begin to sink into the ocean, many thousands of years before my time. The Kaloo saw that their land was sinking and went by ship to Egypt, although some went farther to the east. They had great wisdom and were most skillful in the making of things, like the jars that gave light without fire. Many of the precious things which the Essenes had were passed down by the Kaloo. There would have been skilled craftspeople who made and repaired such things at the height of the Kaloo civilization in the old land in the west. But centuries had passed since some of these things were made. I think the Kaloo who visited us were mainly messengers and teachers, not skilled craftsmen, so they could not tell us how to repair these things when they ceased to function. This makes fascinating reading alongside Sudi's account of them in Jesus and the Essenes by Dolores Cannon. The jars he mentions are particularly intriguing, as they seem to have been an early form of electricity. Examples of these jars could at one time be found in the Berlin Museum. And it says to see Jesus and the Essenes, pages 51 to 54, and that's in the Dolores Cannon book, which I do also own that one. And I did read that one, and that one was really, really good. So Joanna asks, did the Kaloo gather in one place? And Daniel says, no, they were scattered and became wanderers. They traveled all the time, and this was their protection. Before any could become too curious about them, they would have moved on. Joanna asks, were the Kaloo a dying race then? And Daniel says, yes, a dying race. As far as the mass of the Jewish people were concerned, this was a race of distant myth and legend, which was now dead. And that was a good thought to foster, as the Kaloo did not wish anyone to be looking for them. Those ones in positions of power would have liked to gain the knowledge of the Kaloo, for it would have made them still more powerful. So it was important to spread the idea that the Kaloo were an ancient race now long dead. Joanna, and the Kaloo gave their knowledge to the Essenes? Daniel says yes, because they knew they would not misuse it. Those who first gathered to set up our communities had peace as their aim. So when the Kaloo first founded our order, they knew the knowledge would be in safe hands. Joanna, how did the Kaloo store their knowledge? Daniel, both in crystals and in scrolls. The crystals were secret, and most Essenes saw only the scrolls which had been copied by our own people. Joanna, were you able to talk to any of the Kaloo and have discussions with them? Sorry, I've had to pause twice just to ask them to keep it down a bit. And Daniel says in response to if they were able to talk to any of the Kaloo and have discussions with them, Daniel says, I talked to them when they came to us, but they were a law unto themselves, and so far beyond us that we revered them as holy beings. Their race was most ancient and most revered. Just a few last remnants of this dying race could be found in my day, a few scattered wanderers upon the face of the earth. We did not know from whence they came or whither they went. They came from time to time and visited our communities to encourage us and see how the knowledge was being stored and passed on. Joanna, did the Kaloo also visit the Druids in Britain? Daniel says, I believe so. My friend Joseph told me the Druids recognized the Kaloo, but by a different name. Different branches of this one great family might call them by different names, but they were the same beings, the same messengers, the same weary travelers, connecting all these scattered ones, these ones who held the knowledge. Joseph told me that sometimes he would meet the Kaloo in his travels, for they were linking with the same places, the same communities and safe places, where their people who thought as we did. And then Joanna says, I wanted to ask him some more about the possibility that the Essenes were descended from the Kaloo. It was certainly a startling idea, and I had come across it first in Jesus and the Essenes by Dolores Cannon. So Joanna asks, could you tell me more about the Essenes being descended from the Kaloo? Daniel, there was so little information on this. I did try to make some inquiries, but it was regarded as a most secret area. In the complete absence of any real information, I concluded that it might be a legend. But there is another possibility. We may be their children in the sense of being their spiritual successors, their inheritors. Joanna, did the Kaloo ever intermarry with the Essenes? And Daniel says, no, they kept themselves apart. They gave us their gifts and came to see how we used those gifts from time to time, but they were on a different level from us. They were masters in dealing with consciousness and energy in most subtle and complex ways. We respected and preserved carefully what they gave us, but we could never really understand them. So in the end, the Kaloo were a mystery even to the Essenes who were lucky enough to meet them from time to time. Yet one thing Daniel said did shed some light on the Kaloo. He said they came from the old land in the west. To me, that sounds very much like Atlantis, and his description of it certainly seems to bear this out. If the Kaloo were an Atlantean people, they would have been ancient indeed, even 2,000 years ago. The date normally assigned to the sinking of the last fragment of the Atlantean continent is around 9600 BCE. If the Kaloo were Atlanteans, that would account for their very advanced technology, including the use of crystals, and for the depth of their wisdom. The Essenes were fortunate indeed to have such teachers and benefactors as these. There are inner and outer founders of any esoteric order, but although Daniel would talk about the Kaloo as the outer founders of the Essene Brotherhood, he would not talk about an inner founder. However, we were able to return to this and get more information at a later stage, and that is chapter 39, which I think is the last chapter in this book. And now we go on to chapter 5, how the Essene way developed. Let me just check this chapter. I think this is going to be the longer chapter. Let me see. I think Oh, you know what? This is the completion. After we read chapter 5, this is the completion of part 2. And I apologize. I think I said that we were on part 3. So just to clarify, we read part 1, the process begins, and we read all 3 chapters because they were very short. And now we're reading part 2, the Kaloo, which is chapter 4. Okay, and now this is really strange. Wait a minute. I don't know if the book is... This is really weird. I just realized this. I thought maybe I was just tripping here. So we go from, I hope nothing's missing, chapter 3, Joseph and Daniel, which is where we left off in our first video with officially reading the book. Then we went into part 2, which we're reading right now. We just read the Kaloo, but it's chapter 4. So I'm confused because we went 3. Okay, I'm sorry. I don't know what I'm thinking here. So yeah, nothing was skipped. We read 3. We just got done reading 4. Now we're going to 5, chapter 5. How the Essene way developed. The sessions with Daniel were now progressing smoothly and easily. There is one particular that stands out in my memory. In this session, Daniel did not wait for me to ask a question, but went straight into a general statement about his contact with us. So Daniel says, I have attuned to the Brotherhood as a whole regarding these dialogues with you. They have looked at your being and know that you wish us well. They tell me that through this dialogue, time can be overcome and a new light can be cast upon the Essene way in future time. I feel it is important that I give you all the help that is necessary if it will assist those who are our people and who may be known to you in another time. This was remarkable in several ways. Daniel had clearly been checking us out, and we seemed to meet with his approval. By saying the Brotherhood as a whole, he seemed to be talking about the existence of some kind of Essene collective consciousness. From this point on, we got the impression that Daniel was sometimes speaking not only for himself, but for the whole Essene movement. But most interestingly of all, he seemed to recognize that from his viewpoint, we are in future time, and the reincarnating Essenes, those who were our people, may need this information now. I really felt Daniel reaching out across time to us here, and I found this very moving. Daniel seemed to be putting the whole contact on quite a new basis. We had certainly been focusing very much upon him, but here for the first time, Daniel seemed to have focused clearly enough upon us to understand what we were about. The last sentence I found particularly significant. We were aware that others who had Essene lives were beginning to come to us, and could already see that this was all part of a greater process of connection. Since Daniel had made such a positive start, I felt bold enough to ask him what his areas of special interest and training were. Daniel, the history of the Essenes, and in particular the part played by the Kaloo, star lore and star cycles, and the mysteries. So those were the things that the Kaloo focused on. The mysteries included teachings, and this is the author talking, which regarded myths as sources of great symbolic power. Only through the insights of modern psychology, particularly the work of Jung or Carl Jung or Carl Jung, however you wish to say it, have we begun to understand the profound impact of archetypal energies on the psyche. Many of the greatest minds in the ancient world were initiates of the mystery schools, which spread throughout the ancient Mediterranean. All mystery schools followed a similar basic structure of outer mysteries, involving ceremonies in which all could take part, and inner mysteries accessible only through a deep and transformative initiatory process. Because Daniel had mentioned history, I decided to ask him about the development of the Holocene movement. We will return to some of the points he touched on here, like the communities and the energy system, later in this book. Daniel, what became known as the Essene Way began about 150 years before I was born. The founders of the Essene Way, which were Kaloo, the ancient ones who came from the old land in the west, first to Egypt and then to our land. They brought with them many secrets, much knowledge, and wonderful machines. They begin to spread out over our land, looking for ones who might set up communities. There was a central place, a place in which much of the knowledge was gathered, and smaller outlying communities. The central community was Qumran on the edge of the Dead Sea, a remote and harsh area, but chosen as such so that it would not attract too much attention. The wonderful machines which Daniel mentions include that most remarkable model of the solar system described in pages 82 to 85 of Dolores Cannon's book, Jesus and the Essenes. I know exactly what they're talking about. It was a very, very cool thing to read about. We think we're so technologically advanced, and in ways of the computer and those kinds of things go, we are. But it's like they knew how to use technology using what the earth gave us naturally by way of crystals, frequencies, vibration, the solar system, the stars, the planets. That was their technology, and that's how they ran their societies, which is probably far more better than the earth than our technologies are. That's pretty, I think, accurate to say. Daniel. When Qumran was set up, the Kaloo began to found other communities amongst those to open to the inner truth, those who were open in their minds and hearts. One by one, the communities were established. Not all of these flourished, and some had a most difficult time. Much work was done upon the energies of the earth in preparation for the time when a great teacher would come. The teacher would need much support through a well-founded energy system. The Kaloo did all this and much more. They helped us, advised us, and visited the communities from time to time. We shall return to the energy system he mentions in a later chapter. Daniel. So the communities were set up, but because we were so secretive and kept ourselves to ourselves, we began to arouse suspicion and hostility, especially among the Pharisees and Sadducees. These ones heard reports of our knowledge and feared that this might outstrip theirs and be deeper and more profound than any knowledge they had. They feared that we might displace them from the position of power they held, and they became intent upon acquiring our knowledge. That knowledge, at any rate, would remain safe. We guarded it carefully so that they would not get their unworthy hands upon it. The Sadducees were a Judaic group drawn from the wealthy and aristocratic families. Many of the Sadducees were priests, and they dominated the temple in Jerusalem. They were rigidly conservative in religion, severe in judgment, and had no popularity amongst the people as a whole. They exercised power outside their stronghold of the temple, mainly by collaborating with the Pharisees. And now Daniel says, the whole Essene effort was centered upon the coming of a great teacher. A teacher of righteousness. And so I'm assuming here they are now talking about Jeshua. At first, we did not know his name. We only knew that a great teacher would come, and he would lead us to the light with a capital L. The Spirit would be strong within him, and many would follow him and listen to his teachings. So it was to be a supportive framework for him, and all would be ready for him when he came. We would be able to take care of him, nourish and protect him, feed his mind, and inspire his soul. But although we would guide his early steps, he would soar far beyond us, for he had a new teaching to bring and a new way to establish. So that we could provide the broadest and most effective learning foundation for the teacher, the Kaloo ensured that our minds were never confined to one religion. They gathered the best knowledge from Egypt, Persia, Greece, and elsewhere, and through their traveling were able to constantly challenge us with new ideas and new perspectives. As they came into our land through Egypt, it was Egyptian ideas, together with our homegrown Hebrew concepts, which formed the original base of our communities. But through the Kaloo's travels in Persia, we came into contact with Zoroastrian ideas, including the duality of light and darkness, and purification rituals with running water, which influenced us greatly. Later on, the Kaloo gained the confidence of the Pythagorean order, and from that point on, we were inspired by the ideas of the great sage Pythagoras on harmony, living an ethical life, and the proper ordering of communities. Zoroastrianism is the ancient religion of Iran and focuses upon a supreme deity named Ahura Mazda, the wise Lord. It was founded in Persia by the prophet and reformer Zoroaster in the 6th century BCE. Zoroastrian concepts of dualism influenced the Greek philosophers and may also have had some impact on the development of Judaism. In Zoroastrian cosmology, good, symbolized by the light, and evil, symbolized by darkness, fight an unequal battle in which good is certain to triumph. Pythagoras was a Greek philosopher and mathematician who lived from about 580 to 500 BCE. He founded a system of thought which influenced Plato and Aristotle. Pythagorean philosophy united an interest in mathematics and harmony, and Pythagorean communities spread rapidly throughout the ancient world. The Pythagorean Brotherhood, which observed strict loyalty and secrecy, held that the soul can rise to unite with the divine. So that was information from the author. Okay, Daniel. Over the course of our history, these 4 major strands came together to create the Essene way: Egyptian, Zoroastrian, and Pythagorean ideas, and the Jewish law. The merging of these 4 sources took place over the century before I was born, and was the result of constant flux and development over this period. Some Essenes preferred one strand to another. For example, many of the priests clung to the Torah. And for most of this time, there was no general consensus which the majority of Essenes would accept. Yet, by the time I reached maturity, these 4 elements had fused and combined to create a powerful and flexible system, which, though diverse, had gained its own stability and balance. Somehow, out of this seething cauldron of experiment and debate, there had emerged a new unity, a powerful and broad pathway to the light. This was the perfect platform for the teacher of righteousness to push forward into new and transformative areas, taking still more advanced and daring ideas out into the greater world. It is also important to understand that mystery schools existed in most of the ancient traditions, and through a study of the mysteries, we gained insight into the universal aspirations of humanity and universal law. This knowledge gave us a much bigger perspective than that of the conventional Jews around us. The Kaloo had encouraged us in these studies and nourished us with information from many sources. Without knowing the part the Kaloo played in our lives, it is impossible to understand the breadth and depth of our knowledge. To view the Essenes, as many conventional Jews did, as simply an offshoot of the main tree of Jewish thought is to ignore the whole pattern of our development, and this can only lead to distorted views of us. We were beginning to glimpse, and this is the author speaking here, the breadth and depth of Essene knowledge here, and the Essenes were starting to emerge as much more universal and significant than we might have expected. I was also aware that we were steadily pushing back the boundaries of secrecy. Daniel had mentioned Qumran for the first time, and although he had not named Jesus as the teacher of righteousness, he was beginning to talk about a great teacher and his central position within the Essene movement. Given the unexpected blessing of the Essene Brotherhood on this project, it was beginning to dawn on us that a whole raft of significant information might emerge. It was with a rising sense of excitement that I now continued the sessions and watched to see where all this process might take us. Okay, so that completed part 2. So that was 2 chapters. I think when I was thumbing through it earlier, I must have skipped one of the chapters, and for some reason I thought that this part of the book was 3 chapters. So we'll stop right there. And in the next video, we're going to start part 3, which is just titled The Essenes. And that's chapter 6 as our first chapter. And that's titled The Essene Communities. And I would say this one is a longer chapter. Some of these are going to be a bit longer. This one will probably read on its own. If not, quite possibly, I may break this up into two because it's a lot of information. And then chapter 7, Life in the Essene Communities. And that one's not too terribly long. And chapter 8, The Essene Children. That will be the next few. That one's not too terribly long. And then chapter 9 is titled John and Roberta. Yeah, I think there's quite a few more parts to part 3 than the initial 2 parts of this book. All right. So we'll stop right there. Thank you all very much for joining me. I love you all so much. I hope that you're all doing well. I hope that you're all taking in whatever information you can and really learning from it, not just with your mind, but also with your heart and your soul. And it is always important to take the time to discern what it is you believe and what it is you don't, and take your time with it. Especially in Power of the Magdalene and Mary's Message to the World. If you followed me on those, we did receive some quite startling information and quite different information, if I may say so. But just proof that it's a never-ending cycle of learning, a never-ending cycle of growth, which I absolutely love. I've never been big on learning new things. I did not care for school all that much. It bored the crap out of me. But the topics that I share with you guys, I feel like I can never get enough. I always want to learn more. I'm always thirsty for more. So if that's you, I'm glad that you found me. So if you haven't, please subscribe, like, comment. I would really, really appreciate it. I would really love to hear from you. I would love to know that people are watching and taking something from this. To the people that do comment, thank you so much. I love you, and I love you all no matter what. And until I see you, take care of you, take care of those around you. Bye-bye.